Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. And for those of you who do not know me, I am Lori Stacy, and I am the director here at the Council on Aging. I am not going to say much more than that other than to introduce you to Brian Harris, our chief, and he will in turn introduce you to everyone else. I'm going to stay out here so that I, as a resident, not as a town worker, can also see the presentation, so I can make my decision based on this presentation. So. And I'm tough.
So good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? Yes? All right, awesome. For anybody that doesn't know me, I am Brian Harris. I'm the town's fire chief. Today we have Jeff and Rebecca from Tecton Architects with us, and they'll be taking us through a presentation on the preferred building project for the renovation addition to the Monson Fire Department. Do you have anything to start, Rebecca? Or?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to kick it off with just a little bit of history of the Monson Fire Department. And forgive me, I have to read off my notes. I don't have it memorized. But going back with the history of the fire department, in 1715, the town of Monson got its first settler. As future families began to move in, we got up to a number of 49 families. When we hit 49 families, they recognized that we had a need for fire protection in the town. They came up with what was called the Monson, sorry, I have to look at that. The Monson Volunteers Association was formed at that point, and that group continued until 1987 when the Board of Selectmen voted to adopt a formal fire department in the town. In 1895, the town occupied two fire stations. One was located on Main Street, right adjacent to the driveway of the fire station now across the street. That is still standing. And one on Fountain Street over by the First Church of Monson. In 1921, the fire department acquires its first piece of motorized apparatus. As you can see, through time, we're just advancing in technology and how we can protect and serve the citizens of Monson. In 1933, the town purchased a combination pumper and hose carrier and put it into use. The next one's kind of important. In 1941, this is around the time of World War II, the Rotary Club donates what was called a McKesson resuscitator inhaler. This was used for suffocation by smoke, drowning, or other emergencies. This would be used on fire personnel or citizens that were suffering from these ailments. This is important. So in 1941, that's when the department got its first capability to start treating people with first aid and medical care. In 1951, our fire apparatus were now equipped with two-way radios. Prior to having two-way radios, everything was done by yelling your orders into the house, or you would have to send a runner to get information from one person to another. In 1956, a 1948 Packard ambulance is donated to the department by the Monson Rotary Club. This is the town's first ambulance. So we've been providing ambulance services to the town citizens since 1956. In 1960, the town purchased its first brand new ambulance. In 1961, the fire department started holding first aid classes for both its firefighters and the citizens. In 1978, this moves us into our existing building. The existing facility was built to replace a drastically undersized and outdated fire station on Main Street. We moved into this facility due to lack of storage, lack of space for modern fire apparatus and whatnot. In 1987, the town meeting voted to hire two full-time firefighter EMTs and one full-time fire chief. So today, where are we today? Today we're in a fire station that was built in 1978. The fire station was designed to hold a 100% volunteer fire department. Our department has drastically changed since 1978. We now provide 24/7 coverage with career staff, and that's both ambulance and fire protection. We employ 8 firefighter EMTs or paramedics, a fire chief, and an administrative assistant, along with nearly 20 on-call firefighters. Those on-call firefighters are not housed at the station. They come in as needed when we have a fire call or a medical where we need additional help. In the last 136 years since the department has been officially formed, we have seen many technological advances, changes and demands in the fire service, some of which will be discussed today. Many of these changes have required that the fire service adapt and change with it in order to protect our personnel and, most importantly, our citizens. We have come to a point where our fire station is no longer meeting the needs of the service or the community that we serve. And at this point, I will turn it over to Rebecca.
Thank you. Yeah,
And you can take it off.
okay. Thank you, Chief. That's much louder. Can anyone hear me okay in the back? Great. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Rebecca Hopkins. I work for Tecton Architects, and with me today is Jeff McElroy, who is a principal and the director of public safety. Together, we have been working over 10 years, solely focused on municipal public safety projects. So this is a true specialty of ours. And if you had the pleasure of seeing our presentation in January, we took a much deeper dive into the overall design. We're going to keep it a little bit more high level. That is recorded and available online. If you want more information, or please stop me if you have any questions. We'd be happy to answer those, but we don't want to rehash too much of that detail today. So one of the first steps of this feasibility study was to really look at the existing conditions. And the chief really set that up nicely with the history of the department. But we did look a little bit further at some of the non-conforming conditions, the structural integrity, the health and safety specific to the best practices that exist today when it comes to separation of what we call a hot zone and a cold zone within a fire station. And I'll give a little bit more info on that. We looked at accessibility as well as some of the multifunctionality and the systems within the facility. So a little bit more on the health and safety. So current practices today look at incorporating transition zones, and this is something that has really played a key role in current fire station design. After you come back from a fire scene, a lot of contaminants and carcinogens come back on your turnout gear, on the vehicles. We want to ensure that that stays isolated within those apparatus bays and do not come further into the station, into the living and working areas of the station. So the incorporation of this transition zone is really critical to the health of the firefighters within the building, as well as looking at the operational safety around the apparatus on the apparatus bay floor and the separation of a lot of those support spaces. The current station does not incorporate any of these best practices, and it is something that became clear as a priority of the department. So a few other of the existing conditions that we noted, site layout. So it is a shared lot, as many of you probably are familiar. It shares it with highway, water and sewer, and access to other residential properties and commercial properties. One thing we always look at is the response route of the fire apparatus leaving the station and ensuring that is uninhibited to ensure the fastest response time. So it is a little bit of a complex route, and it is insulated from a site standpoint, so getting to that street edge and then being able to respond from there is a little complicated on the current site. We also look for multi-points of access. Again, as an emergency response facility, we want to ensure that you can safely get off-site, that those responders can get off-site, even if there is an emergency at the street or there's something blocking their way off the site. So that is something that we also look to incorporate in all of our public safety facilities. From a building exterior standpoint, it's a CMU, so a cement block construction. It is in fair condition, but there is some visible cracking along the edges. It's really what we've found is that there's moisture and water getting in through the roof, and it's penetrating the exterior wall construction. When we were out there on site, we go out as architects with all of our engineers, and we look at all of these different systems. We look at the structure. You could see the water in that exterior wall, and the edge of the wood floor joists were actually wet on the day we were there. So water is kind of getting into that envelope, and that is something that we would need to address immediately. We looked at accessibility, ensuring that the doors and access points are compliant, not only for visitors, but also for the firefighters within the station. Currently, the station is not accessible. It does have a few different changes in grade within the building, or changes in levels, as well as kind of how you approach the facility. The main entry is also kind of hidden off to the side, and really doesn't reflect the pride and respect that the department feels it has towards the service it provides to the community. We looked at the building interior. A lot of the rooms have multi-use functionality just due to lack of space. One prime example of this is the training room, which also doubles as the kitchen, which also doubles as the report writing area, which also doubles as a transition zone coming off the apparatus bay floor, which also provides access to the second floor. So there is many opportunities within building design to layer program. We want to ensure that a space isn't sitting vacant for hours during a day, but at some point it does get a little bit too cumbersome to have that many different functions within that space, and it impacts the ability to respond and effectively do their jobs. We looked at the use of the second floor. So the second floor was originally designed as a utility mechanical space, and this currently has been fit out to kind of support a lot of different needs. It accommodates living quarters, some office space, fitness, a lot of the firematic storage. So all of the storage that is needed on the vehicles is actually stored up on this mezzanine, so very remote from the vehicles themselves. So again, high level of multifunctionality, and it's a really low head height because it was always intended to really be more of a support storage space. So looking at how we can better resolve that story as well. I mentioned operational safety around the apparatus bay. You can see with a few of these images here and in the packets that were provided, which is a copy of the presentation, it's really tight to the nose of the vehicle, besides the vehicles. You can't open the doors and safely move around them. We have found through research that over 44% of injuries actually do not occur on the scene of a fire and occur within the station themselves, just due to your ability to move around those vehicles safely. Again, they have a fair amount of support space and support equipment on the apparatus bay floor, being exposed to all of those same carcinogens, and then also impacting their ability to kind of move around those vehicles. So we first started at looking at some larger scale options. We went through a full programming exercise with the department and determined a need for today and into the future. The result of that was two solutions. One was an addition renovation, one was a new construction option. But both, when we presented the price point, we presented the total square footage to the select board, really did not seem feasible for this community to move forward with. And we were given some new tasks to look into as a result of that. But the part one solutions did require about 20,000 square feet of space. And the price points on those were $15.9 million for an addition renovation and $16.1 for a new construction. And both were hovering right around that 19 to 20,000 square foot mark. So that was really that, if we look into the future, 35 plus years, what is the needs of the department and what would that look like from a building design standpoint and from a layout standpoint? But again, it seemed too much for the community to really move forward with. So our task became, let's look at that list of programmatic elements and start to prioritize. If we could get one thing, what would it be? If we could fix two things, what would they be? If we can't operationally support the department for the next 50 years, maybe we can support them for the next 25 years. And so we held a number of different meetings with the department. The full department was participatory in this. And we determined this list of priorities through multiple exercises. And the number one priority that came back was if we could solve the decontamination issue, and really that is really related to that health and safety item that I mentioned earlier, that would be the best. Second was living quarters, so a better separation of that live and work space outside of the response areas. The locker shower rooms, which are very much tied to that, and also personal decon. So when you're decontaminating, we're not only talking about equipment, but we're also talking about your person. Bay congestion and bay quantity. So again, really tying back to operational safety. And then a few of the other priorities that kind of trickled in behind those were a separate training and classroom space, a separate public entry, additional administrative space, and additional adjacent storage space in that order. So we took this and we kind of reduced the program down and came up with 10 plus solutions which could be configured in multiple different ways. They were all based on these top priorities. Some solutions only met 4 priorities. Some solutions strove to hit all 9 priorities. So it was a wide range of building sizes, a wide range of building price points, and that was, again, just to give the community the most amount of options. The committee reviewed this at length, the department reviewed these at length, and really kind of narrowed in on the ones that they felt supported the department for the longest and met the most of those priorities, but still was financially feasible for the community and the most responsible solution. So these are the summary of options. Again, we had option 1 and 2 from part 1 of the study, which we kind of left in the past, and we moved into this part 2 of the study, and we came up with options A through H. So those are these additional 9 options I mentioned. And again, they were very configurable. You could take a piece from one or a piece from the other and kind of move them around. They varied from anything from about 3 million to, in this case, about 15.6 million, and I'll give a specific example of why there was one that was that large. So our kind of smaller reduced programmatic ones range from about 3 to 7, and the 15.6 was a request specific to look at a different type of construction for the full program. So we actually looked at a pre-engineered type of facility or wood framed versus different types of conventional construction to make sure that we were looking at all options for the full program and get those price comparisons. As a result, we've got these numbers here. They were presented and escalated to a certain point during those studies, and we've escalated them now to current dollars with a potential next steps and schedule to this, and I'll talk about that at the end. And that really gives you a sense of what this will cost, not only today, but when it could possibly be built in the future. So of these options, I'm going to focus on option E because option E is the preferred option of the department and the option that was presented to both the Finance Committee and the Select Board. Of these different options, again, we've got some that meet only a few of those priorities and some that meet all 9 priorities. So option E is a 2-story addition as well as a medium bay addition. And so I'll give you a sense of what these different options included. The first one was a single-story addition, very minimal programmatic increase, and it only met 5 of the 9 priorities. The second was a single-story addition with a small bay addition. So we were addressing the living side of the building and the apparatus bay or the garage side of the building, and we kind of built from there. Option E, and when we talk about the years, you'll see in that chart that's included in the package, we talk about the operational lifespan. So we talk about the lifespan of the building. We're not saying that the building's going to fall down in 20 years. We're saying that that would be how long that we could potentially foresee this building supporting the department operationally for that duration of time, where it may need to be modified at that point. So option E, which is the 2-story addition and medium bay solution, would support the department for 30 to 35 years. It met all 9 of 9 priorities established. And again, it does not meet the full programmatic need established at the beginning of the study, but it focuses in on those priorities that we determined as a part of this part 2 exercise. As you can see here on the site plan, it is situated where you've got these 2 additions, one on either side. So you've got this, we'll call it office and living space on one side here to the north, and you've got a medium apparatus bay addition to the south. The department currently has equipment that sits outside year-round. This is an effort to bring all of that equipment inside, increase their quantity so that all of that equipment can be housed and those assets can be best maintained, as well as giving a proper sized bay according to current design standards to allow for that flexibility. Many times when you have smaller vehicle bays, similar to the ones you have currently, it requires customization of your vehicles when purchasing, which drives up the cost of that equipment because you're limited by the height and the width of your bays, of your doors. So current standards typically will carry a 14 by 14 foot door, and they are roughly on average about 20 feet wide. Your bays now are much narrower than that, and that results in kind of some of that tight imagery and that the potential for injury when operating around those vehicles when responding to a call. From a floor plan standpoint, this orange here in the middle is really those apparatus bays that would remain in place as they exist today, but we're really making an effort here to pull all of that firematic support space off of that bay floor into separate containment. There's a lot we can do, not only from a transition zone standpoint, which is really separating out this apparatus bay in the living quarters, but also just from an isolation standpoint to ensure we're not pulling air from one space to another. So we work heavily with our engineers to ensure that we're creating that level of separation between these support spaces. You've got that apparatus space sitting in the middle. So just to the left of that, as a part of this new addition, would be the new main entry facing right at the front of the building. So when you were going to drive up, that front door and that public entry would be right in front of you. You're immediately greeted by a stair and elevator, which goes upstairs. Adjacent to you is a few offices, and then just down the hall is a community training room. This room is also intended to double as an EOC and could be used for different community events, CPR training, internal department training, etc. It has been separated from the other living and report writing areas that the firefighters use on a daily basis. Just between, which is within the existing footprint of the building, which is really where all of those office type spaces and those living type spaces exist today, we've created a multifunction transition zone. So we've brought all of the apparatus, all of the turnout gear off of the apparatus floor into those transition zones so that gear can be downed and grabbed outside of that apparatus bay floor. It's also not being exposed to all the contaminants that come back with those vehicles, as it is now within an isolated environment. We have toilets and showers very much where they exist today. They've been renovated to meet all of the current accessibility codes to allow for that personal decon when you're coming back from a call. If you move to the right, you've got the medium-sized apparatus bay addition. Again, that gives a current standard apparatus bay for flexibility to house larger vehicles, as well as all of these adjacent firematic support spaces. That includes SCBA, which is the oxygen tanks that have to be filled. Currently, those are filled on the apparatus bay floor amongst all of those contaminants. So getting that in a separate room is really critical to the health of those officers, pulling EMS storage, which is up on the mezzanine, down onto the floor so it's easily accessible to the ambulances when needed, and that's kind of doubling for other type of firematic equipment. And again, pulling in all of that apparatus that is sitting outside into the apparatus bay on the back side of the station. On the second floor, you can see that a lot of these are open to below because those apparatus bays are a bit taller of a space. We do like to leverage some of this height with mezzanine type storage or mezzanine type training opportunities. You're already paying for the volume it's needed for the vehicles themselves. By adding a floor, you can really increase the capability of handling a lot of different storage as well as different internal training within the facility. On the second floor up above, that really has become all of the living quarters and all of the workspace for the firefighters. The bunk rooms are up there, as well as the kitchen area and the day room and all of their report writing space. This is a quick rendering, just a visualization of what this may potentially look like. This would obviously be continuously developed through the different design phases, and we would continue to work in partnership with the committee and the community to ensure that it fit the aesthetic that the community feels that it really needs to be. We always pay close attention to this. It's, as architects, it's not about our ego. These are municipal facilities that serve a community, and they should represent that community it serves. So this is a simple exterior that we are currently proposing, a clapboard siding, so similar to what you'd see on a house, but it is cementitious, so it is a little bit more durable and lower maintenance. That is something that we'll continuously look to include in all of our finishes on the exterior and the interior. So you can see those two additions to the left and to the right of that existing station, which is floating right in the middle here. So the total cost currently, so again, the total square footage of this solution is 17,200 square feet. There's a new addition on the one side, which is the 5,500 square feet, and that apparatus bay addition on the other side, which is the 3,600 square feet. And then you've got the renovation of your current footprint, which sits, give or take, you've got about 4,500 of apparatus bay space of square footage currently, and then you've got about 1,800 of office space currently. So we'd be renovating those to those spaces that we discussed earlier. The total cost, when we talk about total project cost, we're not just talking about hard costs. We like to give a full picture of what it would really take to complete the project. So we talk about those in 3 different buckets. The first is construction costs. So that's your hard cost. That's your brick and mortar for the building itself. If you were to bid this project traditionally, that would be the bid number received. The second bucket we like to talk about is project development costs. So there's a lot of different things that are required to make a project like this happen. You've got different architectural and engineering fees, you've got material testing, you've got furniture, fixtures, equipment that have to be put into the facility, required testing during construction, et cetera. So those are all included in the second bucket, which we like to include allowances for at least those different items to ensure that the project can be brought to fruition. And the third bucket is construction and project contingency. So contingency, again, are percentages on the hard costs and the soft costs to allow for some of those unforeseens and unknowns that could occur during construction. Doing municipal projects, we understand that if a funding request is involved, you go to that well once and you ask for that money once. There's no going back and asking for additional funds. So we always want to ensure that the budget we are creating is sustainable throughout the duration of the project, and that we can ensure that if anything does come up during construction that we were unaware of, our budget allows us to respond accordingly to that. So the construction contingency is included. It's percentages on top of that bid cost and those project development costs to ensure that, again, that project can be completed. If those monies are not utilized, they're turned back to the town, and that would be, it's really just, again, to make sure that that project can be completed. This budget does assume a certain construction start date. So one thing to note as a part of the budget is we're not pricing out the budget for today. We want to ensure that it is priced out through the midpoint of construction, because that's what your bidders will do on bid day. So this assumes if the project were to go to the Springtown meeting for a potential funding request and then eventually to a ballot vote, we would then have to proceed into all of the different design phases, and we could potentially start construction in May of 2024. So essentially 1 year from this coming May. We are assuming a 12-month construction duration, so about a year of construction. This would require some temporary operations because the fire department has to remain operational during construction. So we would have to work that into this overall solution. And then essentially we say, okay, at the midpoint, so 6 months into that construction, that's where we want to assume our construction costs are. So that is incorporated into this number currently, so that these costs are projected all the way into the fall of 2024. Now, if that project start date moves at all, that escalation would have to adjust as well. So this project schedule or potential project schedule includes that Springtown meeting presentation and potential vote, as well as the debt exclusion ballot vote. We would then proceed into design development, construction documentation, and then bid the project and receive those bids, and potentially then proceed into construction. So that would bring you out into about April or May of the following year the project would be completed. So that would be 2025. So again, it is the recommendation of the Building Assessment Committee, as well as the Select Board, to proceed exploring option E. The committee and the department has made a commitment to ensure that we are educating the community as much as possible. So we will be having community presentations once a month, all the way up until the Springtown meeting. We had one in January, we have this one today, and our next one is on March 8th at the library at 7 p.m. We are trying to ensure that these are on different days of the week at different times to ensure that we have the maximum attendance and the maximum availability to the community, given everyone's busy schedules. The next step that we're working with the finance department on is looking at the taxpayer impact per household. So taking this number, looking at it at an average cost, household cost, and what that potential tax rate increase could be, as well as kind of looking forward to that Springtown meeting presentation. And Jamie is here if anyone has questions specifically to the financing. At our March meeting, we'll be looking to kind of incorporate that more graphically so that we have a little bit more fine of numbers on that. But she is here if you have any questions. With that, that was all I had for today. If you guys have any questions, please feel free.
Sorry, Jamie has another meeting to go to, so she wants to speak.
Yeah.
Hello, Jamie Farnham, Finance Director. We initially had a analysis for just based on estimates on the 6 million. Because of the escalated price, I do have it based on 7 million. I just want to explain that this would be a debt exclusion, so that is in excess of what our levy limit is. So that would be a part of other debts that we have as debt exclusions, which I did bring. Our current list right now that we have for debt exclusions is the middle school construction, and that's rolling off in fiscal year 24. So our last payment will be fiscal year 24. And the payment for that is $782,850. We get reimbursed about just under $600,000 through the MSBA grant. And the actual overall payment that's raised in addition to the levy limit is $185,000. The high school construction just rolled off in fiscal year 22. And in that place, we had the Corey Hill roof construction come on at $161,000. And so the debt for the high school construction was at $214,000. That rolled off, and then we brought on the Corey Hill roof construction. And then the other debt exclusion that we currently have is the Town Hall Police Station construction, and that is at $191,000. And so these amounts are all raised in excess of our levy limit of the 2.5%. And the fire station, the timing of it, depending on the completion of construction and then the short-term borrowing turning into long-term borrowing, and if it was approved at the annual town meeting, it would have to be approved as a debt exclusion. And just based on some rough estimates that I have here, the financial advisors gave us a 20-year, 25, and 30-year option. From a financial standpoint, I would be recommending the 20-year, just so that way we're paying less in interest overall. And the principal payment would be about $350,000 based on an equal principal loan. So that would be equal principal each year. So that way we can budget it in for the general fund, and we would know exactly how much it would be each year. And the total impact based on a $300,000 assumed home valuation would be about $207 a year, which is about $16 a month. But again, that would all be based on your home value estimate and then interest rates changing. This is all subject to change, so it's not a definite estimate, but just definitely something to put out there based on the costs that were presented today. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, you said it's gonna be over $200 a year more on your taxes?
Yeah, so that based on, I'm not saying it'll be for sure that amount, but based on the estimates that the financial advisor had given us on a $7 million bond, that's how much it would impact the average household assumed value that they had provided. So, and that is just talking about the bond construction, not any other changes to the budget, to the regular general fund. This would just be the debt exclusion for the levy limit of that fiscal year. And then the life of the loan. So that was the other thing I'd like to mention is the debt exclusion is just the life of the loan. So if we chose a 20-year loan to pay back on the fire station, that debt exclusion would then roll off. And to be financially responsible of planning our debt, we always try to look at what's coming off and what are the needs of the town to then bring on to the debt. Any other questions?
Jamie, that $200 a year was based on a $300,000 value.
Yes, and that was the estimate that Yeah, so that's a good question, Lori. Yeah, so that is just based on if your valuation of your home was 300,000, that number will fluctuate based on the value of your home, and the tax rate for that's set for that year. Yes.
Specific numbers, in fact, you tell us a percent increase, so you know the value of your home, you can kind of figure what you get hit with.
That is something we could try to look at. For the estimates that we have, I just have the broad amount, but there are tools actually on DLS that you can look at and be able to play around with that. So maybe that's something we can share too, the link for, so that way residents can look at that. Yes.
What kind of reimbursement or aid might the town expect from the state or the federal government in a project like this?
That is a great question, because with the debt exclusion, when we have the bond amount, any reimbursements for grants that we have towards a project, say for a school project, we get the MSBA reimbursement, that actually comes off the debt exclusion. For the fire station, I'm not, maybe that'd probably be a question for Brian, if there's any pending grants, but that any grants or other funds raised could offset the debt amount that we would then be asking and then bringing on for the debt exclusion. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Go.
Go for it. So has the cost been factored in to because of the age of the building, bring the building up to code? Or is that under the construction and project contingency?
So under the current option, bringing the building itself up to code is included in that construction cost. So everything that would be required to bring the building up to the current standards, that includes the energy code, that includes accessibility codes, is included in that number. The contingency is really for an unforeseen. An example of that might be in a renovation, you might open up a wall or knock something down and you find something that you were not expecting to find there. It may require a minor change for the contractor. That's where you'd pull from that contingency line item.
So that's my resident question. My other question is, I'm the town clerk, so I have a town clerk question. So you had mentioned that construction would begin in April of '24, and we all know that 2024 is going to be a huge election year, and we have our elections there at Memorial Hall. So how would construction impact voters going, because they kind of park, like parking is very limited, so they park, in front of the highway garage to not too close, kind of in the middle. So I wondered what about that, because I'm pretty concerned about that.
That's a great point.
Interestingly enough, we hadn't discussed an option for that, but I think there's some easy ones. Since we haven't written the construction contract yet, it would be very easy to write into the contract to cease operations for election days, so that we could make the maximum available parking and the least disruption with the construction crews and their equipment. So that's an easy fix, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, also, because I'm asking now because if it got to a point that we had to move the election, then we could consider moving it to the school like we had in the past, but just kind of talking about it now, yeah.
So Mary, I think a second part of that is we're going to have to work around the other facilities that are down there, highway, water. So we're not going to be able to block their access and parking lot anyways. So we're going to have to be very careful about how we work things in. And to answer the gentleman's question about the grants, we are actively looking for grants. We have not found one that fits this project yet. There has been talk on the federal side of a grant coming out. The bill does have support from Massachusetts representatives and senators, but it has not been passed at this point.
Right.
Yes.
Needless to say, because of our tax impact this year, our valuation went way up because the tax number went down. And money has to come in. Our valuation is going to be higher next year, guaranteed. no doubt about it. So when we're talking $300,000 valuation, people might be in the 350 range by next year, or even higher than that.
Correct.
So as long as everybody understands that whatever your valuation is now on your tax bill is not the same as next year.
Correct.
Correct. And Jamie, if I'm not mistaken, our valuations are usually a year and a half to 2 years behind what the current day is.
Right.
So, if we, well, I want to get into that, but they could go up, they could go down.
Yeah. And one thing we have done in the past, and we can work with Jamie on this, is not only giving that average home value of the 300,000, but we can also give some different increments just so that people have a sense. If my home is valued at 250 or 400,000, then you can also kind of see what those impacts might be. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm happy we kept it to a half an hour today. Again, there's the brochures, which has a lot of those key takeaways, and all of this will be recorded and available online. And we hope to see many of you again in March. Thank you.